The Russian Revolution was far more than a simple struggle against autocracy. It was an immense collision of disparate nations, a volatile tapestry woven from ambition, deep-seated grievance, and profound mistrust. It was an event that sought universal brotherhood, but inadvertently laid the groundwork for internal division, revealing an inherent, unresolvable fault line within the very structure of the Soviet state. This is the story of how the foundation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was built not on unified consent, but upon a dangerous compromise, a tension forged between Moscow's singular, centralized vision and the complex, often contradictory ethnic realities of its immense periphery. For those who envisioned a new world, they did not begin with abstract decrees. They began with a negotiation born in the crucible of revolutionary betrayal. They attempted to translate an international ideal into tangible governance for a population defined by ancient, competing nationalisms. Look closely at the architects of this edifice, the regional leaders and minority intellectuals who were compelled to trade their ancestral loyalties for the intoxicating promise of power. This is the tragic mechanism known as the Nationalities Trap, how a revolution designed for universal unity became the engine of painful, irreducible fragmentation. To grasp the full weight of this tragedy, we must first understand the origins of the movement's leadership. The Bolshevik project demanded more than mere revolutionary fervor. It required administrative architects capable of bridging theory and brutal reality. From the vast expanse of the Pale of Settlement, through the contested territories of the Caucasus, and across the Baltic littoral emerged a specific group of thinkers. These were men who navigated the dialectic of Marxist theory, while simultaneously grappling with the lived experience of deeply fractured regional identities. They understood that abstract internationalism offered no solace when confronted by the immediate, brutal necessity of governing an empire already defined by historical ethnic rivalries. These pragmatists recognized that true political change required more than just class struggle. It demanded a strategy to dismantle the inherited political structures of the Tsarist nobility. They harnessed Marxist internationalism not as a final destination, but as a tactical tool, a means to bypass old hierarchies and establish legitimacy by positioning themselves as agents capable of enacting immediate change for their specific peoples. Yet, this theoretical ambition clashed violently with practical implementation almost immediately. The revolutionary aim was not a borderless utopia. It was sheer survival. This created an agonizing internal contradiction that Lenin and his inner circle struggled desperately to manage. How could one impose a singular, unitary state structure upon societies fundamentally defined by deep cultural and linguistic fissures? This profound tension led directly into the next crisis, the empire striking back within. Lenin, often portrayed as the unyielding master of doctrine, was haunted by the reality that the revolutionary momentum depended on loyalty that Moscow could not simply command. He viewed the broad expanse of the Russian people, and indeed his subordinates, with a deep-seated suspicion rooted in great Russian chauvinism. For him, the existential threat to the revolution was twofold: external capitalist invasion and internal disintegration fueled by the resurfacing power of ethnic separatism. To mitigate this perceived threat, the Bolsheviks introduced Korenizatsiya, the policy of indigenous rooting. This was an attempt to gain immediate legitimacy by granting political and cultural concessions to the non-Russian populations. The goal was pragmatic: to soothe regional resentments and solidify support among the vast, diverse peripheries by allowing local leaders to govern their affairs in their native languages. It was a desperate maneuver intended to stabilize a volatile political landscape. However, Korenizatsiya proved to be more than just a palliative. It became a fragile bandage over a gaping wound. By granting localized autonomy and cultural rights, The Bolsheviks inadvertently codified ethnic identities into concrete political demands. Instead of dissolving regional differences, this policy made them visible, allowing nascent regional ambitions to crystallize fiercely around distinct linguistic and national spheres. It created an ideological hybrid, a state nominally unified by the Red Banner, yet internally segmented by competing loyalties that were now fiercely institutionalized. This segmentation soon manifested with devastating force during the Russian Civil War. The Bolsheviks weaponized these existing ethnic grievances with brutal efficiency. Ethnic militias, empowered by regional support from desperate local populations, became critical assets in dismantling the forces of the White Army and undermining imperial logistics. In this volatile trade, local nationalists were offered allegiance in exchange for military participation, a calculated risk that transformed political difference into a volatile, blood-soaked alliance. The revolutionary victory thus became not a unified national liberation, but a collection of localized sacrifices, fundamentally embedding an unstable foundation within the nascent Soviet state. As the Red Army fought its way through Eastern Europe, the administrative machinery buckled under the sheer weight of this multiplicity. The logistical nightmare of governing such immense diversity proved insurmountable. Revolutionary zeal violently collided with deep-seated linguistic and cultural barriers, creating a fragmented command structure where communication fractured and resource allocation became a zero-sum game between competing regions. Within the early Politburo, this friction was palpable. Ethnic factions, the burgeoning power centers in Ukraine, the Baltic states, and the Caucasus, competed fiercely for scarce resources, territorial recognition, and administrative authority. The idealized vision of an ethnic synthesis promised in propaganda dissolved into the gritty reality of a state struggling desperately to maintain singular command over immense, disparate territories. The centralization that Lenin initially sought began to fray under this enormous strain. The initial inclusive vanguard, designed to unify, ultimately gave way under the pressures of perpetual conflict and resource competition to a more rigid, centralized iron fist. This shift was driven by stark necessity. Regional autonomy became viewed as an intolerable liability, and absolute control emerged as the only guarantor against total collapse. The compromises made in the early years, the concessions granted to appease ethnic minorities, were not acts of enlightened governance. They were necessary structural adjustments that fundamentally shaped the rigid federal structure of the USSR. They embedded points of friction precisely where unity was desired, ensuring that the state's coherence remained conditional upon the continuous suppression of these very differences. And this is where the blueprint for future instability was drawn. The historical fractures initiated by the Nationalities Trap did not disappear with the establishment of the Soviet state. They were merely codified and institutionalized within its very framework. These early concessions, born out of desperate necessity, set the stage for the internal conflicts that would define the subsequent century. Today, when we examine the geopolitical instability across Eurasia, we are still tracing the lines drawn by those original ethnic concessions. The rigid federal structure imposed in the 1920s remains a stark testament to how the initial attempt to harmonize disparate worlds inevitably resulted in an unresolvable fault line. The enduring legacy of Lenin's Nationalities Trap is not just a historical footnote. It is the deep, structural tension that continues to dictate the shifting alliances and relentless instability of the modern world. This structural fragility is not merely a memory. It is an operative principle that continues to shape contemporary geopolitical dynamics. The artificial boundaries and administrative hierarchies established in the name of revolutionary unity continue to exert gravitational pull, dictating where power flows, where conflict erupts, and where fragile peace is maintained. Consider the concept of state formation itself. The tension between imposed uniformity and inherent cultural heterogeneity remains a perpetual negotiation. When these foundational tensions are ignored or suppressed, they do not vanish. They metastasize into latent energies ready to explode. The internal contradictions that define the Soviet project were merely a microcosm of a larger human struggle. The challenge of reconciling deeply held identities with the demands of organized political power. As nations strive for coherence, they inevitably grapple with the paradox of belonging. How to forge a unified identity without erasing the specific, localized histories that gave meaning to those identities in the first place. This enduring tension is visible today in every border dispute, every civil conflict rooted in historical grievance, and every struggle over self-determination across the globe. The maps drawn in the crucible of revolution are not static historical artifacts. They are dynamic blueprints that continue to inform the complex, often brutal, interactions between nations we inhabit now.